The Atlanta Motor Speedway is one of NASCAR's fastest racetracks, and it's the place for race number 4 of the Sprint Cup season. But before we get into racing on the Sprint Cup side of things, we got to get you down for Truck Series racing, which happens today. The grid is now set. Congratulations to Kyle Busch, who just has the hits keep on coming, as Kyle has got yet another award in NASCAR's 3 Top Series, and that's the pole position for this afternoon's truck race. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Speed Stage. I'm John Roberts, kicking off another full day of coverage here at the Atlanta Motor Speedway. Thanks for being with us. Let's now get you down into the garage areas. We're getting ready for Sprint Cup practice. Let's check in with Bob Dillner.
Well, of course, last night here at the Atlanta Motor Speedway, Mark Martin, the ageless wonder, won the pole, and he was very excited, said he felt like a rookie because he was shaking, out of breath during that qualifying run. Well, I just spoke to the team. Now they're concentrating on race runs here at the Atlanta Motor Speedway, and they told me that yesterday Mark Martin was exceptional on the racetrack in race runs, and that's only because he was able to hold on to the car better than any of the other younger guys. So that car was slipping and sliding all over the place. Now, I do want to talk about Michael Waltrip. He was just in the booth with speed for NASCAR Camping World Truck Series qualifying. Well, if you take a peek right there, I still don't see Michael, so he's still on his way down there. But Michael Waltrip Racing has 2 cars in the top 12 so far after 3 races in the Sprint Cup Series. Michael and David Rudiman, they are riding a high, and they hope to balance out their cars after semi-poor qualifying efforts last night here in Atlanta. On the other front, we're talking a little bit about Dale Earnhardt Jr. Dale Earnhardt Jr. has been struggling big time in the first 4 races of the season, and last night was still an indication that this team is struggling. I did speak to the team just minutes ago about how this car was and what they needed to do. They told me one thing: we need to keep this car off of the racetrack. If we keep it off the racetrack, Junior will go a lot faster and feel a lot more comfortable. But that is the battle during this practice session for Dale Earnhardt Jr. Hermie Sadler.
Well, thank you, Bob Dillner. Another one of the great stories so far this year is this car behind me, number 71 TRG Motorsports of David Gilliland. Now, they finished 14th last week in Las Vegas. I talked to Slugger Labrie, the crew chief, just a moment ago. He said, this is the same car we have raced 3 weeks in a row. I said, why? He said, not only does it run well, it's the only car we've got completed back in the shop. They got capital window on this car for this week and in Bristol in 2 weeks, and after that they need more sponsorship to keep going. But a great run last week, a little momentum headed into Atlanta for David Gilliland, and this team really needs it to continue in 2009. JR?
And Hermie, thanks a lot. There you see the busiest man in NASCAR, Michael Waltrip, just fresh off of Truck Series qualifying here on speed, and looks like he's going to make it back behind the wheel of that number 55 car as Booty Barker and crew are waiting for Mikey to jump behind the wheel of that race car. Let's now take a quick look at the menu, see what's coming up for the rest of today. On speed, we got Sprint Cup practice coming up next. Sprint Cup final practice in between those 2 sessions. We'll stop down here at the stage for a brief update, and then the Camping World American Commercial Lines 200 at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Folks, if you're in the Atlanta area, you still have time to make it down here. Plenty of tickets left. If you want to see some of the best racing anywhere, come down and see the Camping World Truck Series here at Atlanta. Well, that's all from the stage right now as Mikey climbs on board of his car. We'll send it up to the broadcast booth for Sprint Cup practice.
Thanks, JR. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Atlanta Motor Speedway, where the track is open for an interesting and abbreviated Sprint Cup practice session. Because of the morning fog and mist, everything was delayed, including qualifying for the Camping World Truck Series. So NASCAR is reverting back to the original scheduled timings, which means this practice starts late, but it's going to end on time in, about 20 minutes.
Now, my man Larry Sprinkle here told me that the sun was going to shine all weekend long, that we had no overcast. It was just going to be blue skies.
And it will. It's still early. It has not really taken away from any on-track activity.
But what happened? I mean,
all week we got to get this vortex going.
Oh, okay.
But I'm going to tell you what, this practice, Darrell, it's a catch-22. You got to practice. But I think we saw yesterday when these cars were practicing in the heat of the day how evil driving they were and how they got a little better last night in qualifying. The forecast, I hold my breath, for tomorrow is sunny and 76 degrees. These cars are going to drive a lot better right now than they will in those type of conditions, considering the track loses a ton of grip when it gets that hot.
You're exactly right. And it's a waste of time, except that you got to go out there and maybe work on your bump stops. The thing that fascinates me is the timing of the bump stops. I mean, I never thought about the timing. In other words, the way the car sets down on those bump stops and how critical that is. You thought you were either on them or you're off them. But the timing of getting on the bump stops.
And Drew Blickensderfer, Matt Kenseth's crew chief, opened my eyes to that a few weeks ago. He said it's no longer do we have a favorite car over another car. He went back and referenced their Daytona 500 efforts where they lost their backup car in a crash in the duel, had to go to the backup car for the 500. He said it wasn't that car that was better. We just got the bump stops. Worked out much better in the front end than we did our primary car that we crashed.
Well, there's an old saying that every problem creates a solution and vice versa. Every solution creates a problem. Is the whole bump stop issue related to the spate of transmissions popping out of gear that we've had over the last couple of weeks?
Well, I'm glad you asked that, because I did spend a little time this week, Mike, investigating this, because we first thought that Mark Martin's transmission had kicked out of gear when his engine blew at Las Vegas. Not true. The engine blew up and the car shook so bad that the transmission came out of gear. But there has definitely been an epidemic of transmissions jumping out of gears. Jimmy Johnson had one in a practice, Dale Earnhardt Jr. at Auto Club Speedway. But the unique thing, they're jumping out of gear off the throttle under deacceleration, getting in the corner. And there's a lot of teams scrambling with this, because what's happening with this car, speaking of bump stops, when they go off in the corner and they land on those bump stops and the car takes a hard set, it's knocking the transmissions out of gear. So a lot of gear and transmission guys right now are scrambling, trying to come up with something to solve this.
Yeah, and when you see these cars like last night qualifying, they go off in the turn one down there. They're almost wheel hopping. I mean, the things are just bam, bam, bam. They got that strong rebound shock package to hold the car down, and it puts a lot of stress and strain on all your chassis parts.
Early on in this session, 3 of the Roush Fenway Fords are among the top 5 speeds. Speed's presentation of NASCAR Sprint Cup Practice, brought to you by the auto parts experts of AutoZone. Get in the zone, AutoZone. And by Touch of Gray from Just for Men. Welcome back to Atlanta. Mike Joy, Larry McReynolds, Darrell Waltrip with you for this practice session, an abbreviated practice. And I guess the best thing is this is no longer an impound race where you'd have to race them like you qualified them last night, or there'd be half the cars might not get through the first lap.
Yeah, but you know what? I mean, when you tape the grills up on these cars, the nose, it plants the nose. And what you want to know this morning is when we untape this thing, we get ready to go racing, what's the attitude of the car? And what do we got to do to get the car back down like it was when we qualified? So there are a number of things, camber, you know, a few things like that you need to work on right now, anticipating that the track's going to heat up a little bit and that it'll be a little different in the next session.
Now we'll still get a final practice session of the normal length, but Larry, in 20 minutes, how much can you get done?
Yeah, I think all you can do is find a baseline, and you're going to go up in the hauler with the engineer and with the driver as a crew chief. You're going to sort through, okay, what did we learn yesterday? A lot of guys made some race runs yesterday. What did we learn this morning? Now we know that we have to fine tune. I think the biggest thing that teams are looking for, and this is no new news at Atlanta Motor Speedway, is grip. This racing surface it's very bumpy, but it doesn't have a lot of grip. I think Goodyear has brought a great tire combination here, as they have at all races this year, but I think searching for grip is what everybody's looking for.
And gear. I mean, if you're going to run the bottom, maybe you pull the lower gear. If you're going to run the top, maybe you want to pull a little higher gear.
So did that low pressure system get out of the Ohio River Valley and push the cold air on up to Maine like you predicted on the Weather Channel yesterday?
We still have the high pressure in the Atlantic that's pushing the warm air into the southeast, and it's the other reason that we're very dry. I have all the faith in the world this will burn off.
This little layer here, you think this is
it's going to burn off.
Little layer?
I keep seeing the sun up there. It's up there.
Boy. Nice save, Bobby Labonte.
Well, but this is right back to what we've seen every race so far. Everybody's trying to get on pit road like they've never gotten on pit road before. Everybody is just pushing it, and they're getting themselves in trouble.
Let's go to the garage and Matt Yoakum.
Mike Carl Edwards won 3 of the last 8 races here at the Atlanta Motor Speedway, still searching for his first win of 2009. When you look at this team, they always are strong here. They were very stout in practice, but Carl said the car was just too tight in qualifying. That's why he had to wait on it, thus scoring the 29th fastest time. The agenda for this session, they've already completed one part of it. Go out, run 10 laps, see exactly where they are with track conditions. Carl says the car's still tight. Behind me, Pierre Coutel, the car chief, and crew chief Bob Osborne. They've already discussed their plan of attack. They're going to change at least the springs on this machine and possibly a couple other changes they're bouncing around just to see if they can improve and get this car to free up a little bit. Now let's go across the garage to the editor of Speedway Illustrated and Hall of Famer, Dr. Dick Berger.
Oh, I'm hanging out with Tony Stewart because if you're making a list of favorites to win the race tomorrow, you better put Tony Stewart's name on that list. They reconfigured this racetrack in 1997, and since then, Tony Stewart has led more laps on it than any other driver. He's also won twice and 15 times in a row. Tony Stewart has been there at the end. New team, don't worry about it. They qualified 11th last night for the race, and tomorrow they'll be stout.
Thanks, Dick.
You know, Darrell, I've been talking to a lot of crew chiefs and a lot of drivers, and one thing that I think's throwing everybody a curveball, the pit road speed here at Atlanta is 45 miles per hour. There is pretty much where it starts, pit road speed at that yellow line. But what they're running into, look how short this first segment is there. It's only 50 feet. Now, if you look at this next segment, look how long that it is. And what's throwing them a curveball is that first segment, because you get in there hot and there's no way you can slow it down enough to monitor out the 45 miles per hour.
I know what they're going to have to do. They're going to have to start making you go. If you're going to pit, you got to come in. You got to get on the apron on the back straightaway.
Well, and you know, a lot
dropping down on the over in the third turn, like a lot of I think a lot of IndyCar races they do that, but some racetracks like Homestead they do that.
Yeah, we have a few racetracks and some they got rid of that has an excess road coming on the pit road, so coming and leaving.
You're going to have to get down on the apron, because if they're going to maintain this this situation down here with pit road, they're going to have to do something. We've had more pit road penalties in 3 races than we had all last year.
Now, one thing NASCAR does during practice is they take the computer display for pit road speeds and they put a display out on pit road, make it available to the teams so they can properly judge whether they are at pit road speed in all segments and sections. And Larry, you're laughing, and why?
Well, a NASCAR official, I talked to him about this yesterday, and he said it's amazing. When we do that, we don't do it every weekend. When we do that, it seems like that's the weekend we have more pit road speeding penalties.
Well, and here's a couple other things too. A lot of teams are playing around with these lights, where if it's green, you're good. If it's yellow, you're, and I think it reminds me of back in the day when I had my team and they'd get here and the car would be all off when we go through inspection. They said, well, it was right at the shop. I said, well, I don't care. NASCAR doesn't care. It's got to be right here. And I think that's some of those calculations, some of the things that teams are doing on their own may not be matching up with what NASCAR is doing.
All right, here's a prime example. We've been watching Kyle Busch in the 18 car. I talked to Steve Addington, his crew chief. Now, even though he had to go to the rear of the field last week, he was on the pole when the pace car was setting pit road speed. These teams come to the racetrack with the engineers figuring the tire size, the gear ratio, and pit road speed. That engineer knows what the RPM should be. When Kyle was behind the pace car last week at Las Vegas, he gave the team and Steve Addington the RPM he was seeing. The engineer said, no, drop it back 200 RPMs. If you go off that, you're going to be too fast. They never had a pit road speeding penalty.
And we learned NASCAR also checks the pace car against the pit road speed limit to make sure everybody is up on it. Speed's coverage of NASCAR Sprint Cup practice brought to you by Toyota. For the latest Toyota racing information, visit toyotaracing.com. Toyota, moving forward. And we're going to move this practice session forward to the top of the hour. They have extended it briefly within the constraints of getting the truck race started on time. So we'll get a little bonus coverage for you here.
Got a little house cleaning. I did the drawing on the telestrator. The one thing I do need to make a point, those lines necessarily are not where the loops are that define the segment, but the segments are different lengths, and it's been documented that at most racetracks, the first segment coming in, like I was showing, is the shortest segment. The lines are a little bit deceiving. Just wanted to clean that up.
Well, I still say, we go out of the pits. You have to stay on the apron until you get to the set over on the back straightaway.
Right.
That's to keep cars from going up in the racetrack in front of oncoming traffic. So if it's the same situation coming in the pits, we should go into the pits over on the third turn and come around the apron to the pits. That way you don't get run over. That way you don't speed.
And I think the reason that first segment is the shortest is so you don't come and flying into that segment at 120 and then slow way down to average it out over a greater distance.
But see, here's the problem. People are making rules that never drove a race car. They don't realize, just like Jeff Gordon last week at Vegas, he got off of the track because he's afraid he's going to get run over. Yeah. He exited a lot faster than he would like to have because cars were bearing down on him and going to hit him in the rear end. So you can't make a rule and then make it something that's kind of hard to do.
The only drawback to your idea of having everybody commit on the backstretch and come around the apron is then you make a green flag stop. Are you going to lose 2 laps instead of just 1?
I don't know, but everybody's going to lose the same.
If they all make green flag stops. You're right. No, you're right. Yep.
Andy Murray had a good qualifying run last night. He's going to start 3rd in this 500-mile race. And right now he's 14th quickest. He's run a total of 20 laps, which is as many laps as anyone. Really think that he felt like there was a lot more in his race car when he qualified. It kind of caught him off guard. He said, there really seemed to be some more there.
Yeah, the track was grippier than he anticipated, but still, he had a great run. Kevin Harvick, one of the double-duty drivers here today. There were, I think, 5 of them attempting to run both races, 3 of whom made it. Kyle Busch, Kevin Harvick, and Mike Bliss.
Do you think maybe Roush has got something figured out here in Atlanta? got 3 cars in the top 5 there with Biffle, Edwards, and Kenseth.
And all 5 are in the top 14 right now. Of course, Biffle has never won here. Carl Edwards has 3 wins here. But David Strimmy right now 3rd quickest in this practice session. He's run a total of 12 laps. David's going to start 28th. We were talking about this yesterday. I just really feel like that the Penske organization, like even with Sam Hornish Jr., the 77, they've gained in a lot of areas. You know, we talked to Kurt Busch, and he felt like last year they were off maybe 10% in a lot of different areas. And you start stacking those 10% up, it ends up not being able to run in the top 15. But I just think the biggest gains they've made, and I've had some drivers tell me this, is these cars are handling really good on the straightaways right now with this new Dodge engine package.
Well, a couple of years ago, that was, you know, we would watch Ryan Newman qualify, for instance. I mean, there was no question that his car was sticking to the track, but it was flying down those straightaways a couple of years ago. They kind of got behind a little bit, but this new engine seems to put them right back at the top of the game.
So the schedule for the day, about 6 minutes left in this practice session. Then we'll take a break of 10 to 15 minutes and reopen the track for final practice that'll carry us right up to 1:30 and the setup for the NASCAR Camping World Truck Series race. Kevin Harvick, one of the double-duty drivers. He and Kyle Busch and Rick Crawford favored for the truck race later today. Busch and Crawford will share the front row. And you'll see it right here on Speed beginning at 1:30. Tomorrow, of course, the Cup race is on Fox. Casey Kane is 11th. He is the 2nd fastest Dodge in this session.
Casey comes in here 13th in the points, only 8 points out of the top 12, but still looking for his first top 10 finish of 2009.
How about Mark Martin? Harry Gant is NASCAR's oldest pole sitter, and Mark's going to have to hang around another 4.5 years to break Harry's record. But how about that? What a night for Mark Martin last night.
And really, when we were listening to him debrief after his lap, I mean, he can hardly get his breath.
Yeah.
I mean, I tell you, a qualifying lap around this place, I said last night, I said again, it's frightening. I mean, you are hanging on for dear life.
But they were the fastest in practice, set the mark early yesterday, and backed it up qualifying, and right now he's 15th quickest. They've had a fast race car all year. They've been one of the teams that suffered from some engine woes at Auto Club Speedway and at Las Vegas last week.
Yeah, I like what Mark said. He said, you know, we don't have any results to show for how good we are.
Bill Elliott, 5-time winner here in Atlanta. They're just ahead of Mark in the Wood Brothers 21. Limited schedule for them this year. Going to run at least 12 races and more if sponsorship develops.
You know, this is the 100th race at Atlanta Motor Speedway tomorrow. This will be Bill's 60th start here. A lot of starts.
Wow.
Yeah, and I remember one particular start here, the All-Star race, which is coming up in how many days, Larry? About 50.
I don't have that number right.
Yeah, they've been having it on speed, but anyway, 70 days to the All-Star race, and they decided to try and move it around, maybe and take it somewhere else, so they brought it to Atlanta. I think Bill amped the field. So
wasn't it a holiday weekend?
Mother's Day.
And nobody came.
Yeah, nobody was here.
Joey Logano's picked up quite a bit. Had a dismal qualifying run, but he is 16th on the practice chart.
Joey making his first start at Atlanta Motor Speedway.
When you turn.
I still believe their game plan is just try to run all the laps of these 500-mile races. And like Greg Zipadelli told me a couple of weeks ago, if we can come home with a good top 20 finish like they did last week at Las Vegas, mission accomplished in the early going here.
Martin Truex in the number 1, last week's pole sitter. He's 13th, or the Daytona pole sitter, excuse me. 13th on the speed chart. We want to say hi to Larry Hart, who drives the transporter for the number 1. He was
this time red black, this time 10-minute break.
He was outside the speedway washing down the hauler, the tractor on, I guess, the hauler on the way in here, and suffered a heart attack. They're going to do triple bypass surgery on Larry Hart on Monday, so we want to wish him well, send him our best.
Boy, it looks like a halfway Roush Fenway lineup in that top 10 there. Got 4 cars up there.
That it does. Biffle, Edwards, and Kenseth in the top 5.
Gordon and Johnson. Gordon 6th, Johnson 10th, and Kurt 7th there.
You know who the sleeper could be here this weekend?
Juan Pablo
Montoya. Likes this place.
He likes to ride high, wide, and handsome.
Yes, he does.
We're going to take a 10-minute break, and then we'll be back with final practice for the Kobalt Tools 500. Let's go back over to John Roberts.
One practice down, 1 to go here at the Atlanta Motor Speedway. And you know, this is the scene of 2 of the closest finishes ever, so it should come as no surprise that the 2 pole positions handed out so far this weekend have been won by a mere 10th of a second. A lot of work going on after this abbreviated practice session for the Sprint Cup Series, and now they're getting ready to have a regular size practice session here in just a couple of moments. Welcome everybody to the speed stage. And as we continue our coverage of this doubleheader weekend for the Camping World Truck Series and the Sprint Cup Series, want to welcome in our good friend Randy Pemberton. Randy, it's good to have you on the stage with us here.
Yeah, good to see you,
along with several hundred of our closest friends out there as well. Let's take a look at qualifying from last night, see who's going to start up front when the green flag waves tomorrow. And after a long drought of some 250 races, Mark Martin, actually 270 races, Mark Martin is back on a pole position in his Hendrick Motorsports car.
And I'll tell you, JR, he has been great since Daytona. Daytona, California, Vegas, of course, the 2 engine problems. If he ever gets together, he's going to be a threat to win, and perhaps he can make up these points and make it to the chase here in another 23 races.
2 other drivers off to a great start this season, Kurt Busch in the 2 and Jamie McMurray in the 26.
I'll tell you what, those Dodge engines for Kurt Busch really coming around. Jamie McMurray's been special. Look at Juan Pablo Montoya, JR.
Quiet so far this year. Jimmy Johnson.
He had a good run last week. Jimmy Johnson, no doubt about it. He's trouble. How about Joe Nemechek?
And great qualifying for him. The fastest of the go-or-go-home cars is Joe Nemechek, Kyle Busch, and Kevin Harvick will all start in the top 10 when the green flag waves on the Kobalt Tools 500 here at Atlanta. But right now, for more on the front row, let's go back to Bob Dillner down in the garage area. Bob?
Well, a very hectic scene down here, Johnny, because that practice session very short in terms of the normal standard of 45 minutes to an hour. So these teams really scrambling down here. One of the teams definitely scrambling a little bit will be the Mark Martin bunch. He wasn't completely happy with his race car. 2 things for Mark Martin. Number 1, he said the car was, quote unquote, everywhere during that last run. And number two, in the first run, he felt a vibration in the drivetrain. So that's two things that Alan Gustafson and the team are looking at. Want to go, and he's on the pole, of course, want to go talk about the guy on the outside of the front row. And he's just 2 stalls over in the garage area. That is Kurt Busch. Kurt Busch really struggling with this car. He was 12th quick, but was not satisfied at all. And you heard Darrell Waltrip and Mike Joy talk about the bump stops on this machine. Well, Kurt Busch felt that it was rotating on the right front bump stop a little bit too hard, and therefore it was a little bit too tight for Kurt around this racetrack. So the top 2 on the front row for tomorrow's race. Mark Martin, not so happy with 15th. Kurt Busch, not so happy with 12th. But one guy that is very happy is the guy that's parked right next door to Kurt Busch, his teammate, David Stremme. Very, very strong in this practice session. He likes how it's actually going on the bump stop. So right now, Kurt Busch and David Stremme, I'm sure they'll be talking about what's going on with their cars, because they are, of course, teammates. David Stremme, 3rd quick in that practice session, guys.
Bob, thanks a lot. And just to clarify, 256 races that Mark Martin has been in since he last sat on the pole. So he's got a good view of this racetrack when it starts. But, you know, Darlington is celebrating 60 years of racing history. And Jeff Gordon started his racing career at a young age, soon grew to become one of the most popular and successful drivers in NASCAR history. Since his 1992 debut in Cup Series racing, Gordon has continued to climb the ladder of success. In 1995, he outran Rusty Wallace and Dale Earnhardt to win his first race at the Darlington Raceway in the Southern 500. Of course, it was this racetrack at Atlanta where he got his start in the Cup Series, and also the last time he led the points was after a race here in Atlanta, and Jeff Gordon finds himself back on top of the points once again. Practice coming your way next.